My First Ghost, A Christmas Experience by M.E. Greene. Leighwood Castle, December 23rd. It's quite impossible to believe that I've been here only 3 days. This is Wednesday evening, and I came on Monday. Looking at myself dispassionately, I consider that I am a woman of sound common sense. I have gone through life up till now, believing in very little that I could not see, unless, indeed, it was scientifically proven. This talk of the supernatural, which is everywhere in the air at present, has seemed to me to be only a sign of the times, the outcome of overwrought nerves, or at best, a morbid hankering after untried experiences. I'm not even sure whether I would have consented to spend Christmas with these people, had I known what I was to be let in for. Yet what am I writing? Of course I would have accepted. I would have laughed heartily had I been told that I was going to a haunted house. Haunted for 300 years, they say. I believe I'm not quite myself tonight. I hope I'm not going to have influenza or any other disease, for I have never felt like this before. Creepy is the word to describe my sensations. I must pull myself together, and before I go to bed, write down exactly what has happened. I will add nothing, nor detract, if I can help it. This is a typical Scottish manor house, or rather fortalice, though not very much of the original fortalice remains. There is still the vaulted kitchen, with the rings let into the roof where the bullock was slung in the old days to be cut up. The walls are 8 feet thick at this part of the building, and a secret staircase is hidden in one of them, with an outlet into the far corner of the huge fireplace. The baking oven of the king's troops was only lately done away with, and the main staircase is altogether of stone, narrow and turning back on itself at every 8 steps, a defence staircase that a single man could keep with his sword arm. The rest of the castle is nothing but a jumble. 600, 500, 300, 100. All the dates of the various wings, not counting the 3 additions made within the last century. And all these varieties, mellowed and softened by the hand of time, have become a cohesive whole, standing high among the heather-clad hills, with the fir trees whispering as no other trees can whisper, and the constant murmur of water from the tumbling stream down the glen, and the scream of the curlews by day, and the owls calling by night. Certainly, if ghosts do exist, and already I've got as far as that, this is the place to find them. I arrived late in the afternoon, and was welcomed into the midst of a merry party at afternoon tea, sitting around the crackling wood fire. Holly was bristling everywhere, its wealth of red berries glowing in the lamplight. The whole atmosphere was genial and Christmassy. I had expected to enjoy myself, and I was sure I would. Another guest had arrived with me, a deaf and elderly gentleman, and shortly afterwards we were taken to our rooms, the one next door to the other. Then followed dinner, an evening with games and music, and so to bed. I confess I was not sorry. I had travelled some distance that day, and was soon in a sound and dreamless sleep. I was awakened almost immediately, so it seemed, by a ruthless rapping at the door. I sat up, very wide awake. The embers still glowed in the grate, and as I was wondering whether I had been dreaming, the knock was repeated sharply and insistently. It had a curious metallic sound, as if the handle of a knife or very bony knuckles had been used. A cold shiver went down my back. I by no means liked it. A few seconds passed, and then came a perfect battery of knocks at the door next to mine, rousing my deaf neighbour, for I heard him calling out, "Who's there?" There was no reply, but in the silence that followed, I clearly heard footsteps leave the door. Someone had been taken ill, I thought, and hurrying on my dressing gown, I lit my candle and looked out into the passage. All was dark. Not a sound could be heard in any direction, except the heavy breathing of my next-door neighbour, who was already asleep again. It was very unaccountable, but there was nothing for it but to go back to bed, and by next morning I had forgotten all about it. It was on Tuesday that I had my second experience, and this time I was in company. After all, though I call myself a woman, I'm not very far past girlhood, and was quite ready when invited to repair to one of the girls' bedrooms, when the men adjourned to the smoking room, to burn hazelnuts and walnuts and try our fortunes for the coming year. The shepherd's room, it was called, with quaint pointed windows, and with legends of poets and great men who had received inspiration within its four walls. It was situated high up in the tower, but higher still, up a winding stair. I was told there was another room, occupied at the time by the son and his wife. She had already retired for the night, whilst in the room below we girls burnt nuts and believed for the moment in their occult properties. So great was our excitement that we determined to summon the occupant of the upper chamber to come and join in the merriment. The door was ajar. Already the youngest of the party was on her feet, when a measured footstep ascending the staircase made her pause. It came along the passage, past our door, and continued on its way up the turret stair. Bother, there's no use going for her now, that's my brother going to bed. The girl came back to her place, and for half an hour longer we continued our efforts. Suddenly, voices arrested our attention. In the distance, the smoking room door had opened, and the men were dispersing for the night. One step separated itself from the others, and ascended the staircase. Simultaneously, my companions looked up, and I felt, rather than saw, the flash of understanding pass between them. "That is really him now," someone said, and then there was silence. "What do you mean?" I asked. "Nothing for little girls to know," I was told, and it's high time we were all in bed. One of the party escorted me to my room and left me there, and I was alone with my own thoughts. This second experience brought to my mind my midnight visitant. I was tingling with curiosity, longing to unravel the mystery. What family skeleton lay here concealed? Some relative, perhaps, of feeble intellect, given to somnambulistic practices. Well, I would bolt my door, I thought, and so I did, and slept the sleep of the just. I awoke next morning to find a wondrous transformation. My breath, as I sat up, formed ringlets in the suddenly chilled atmosphere of my room. The window panes were dimmed with frost crystals, and all over lay a mantle of virgin snow. I sprang to my feet with surprise and delight. It was so sudden, so unexpected. In a few hours a fairy wand had decked the world anew. The branches of the silver fir trees swept the ground, bending beneath their weighty garment. The noses only of the shrubs were left visible. Landmarks were completely swept away, except where the stream, looking black and cold, cut a channel through the snow wreaths, and the hills in their silent purity looked down on the scene. It was bitterly cold, and I hurried through my toilet and welcomed gladly the gong for breakfast. The party were assembling when I entered, but there was no surprise on any of their faces. Rather unexpected was the verdict, but evidently no unusual occurrence. When the son of the house appeared, however, things took a very different turn, and his first words made all the caterers for breakfast come to a sudden standstill. "Well, good folks, I've seen her at last." "Oh, not really? When? Where? Oh, tell us." The exclamations came thick and fast. "There's not much to tell. I was asleep, and I had one of those vivid dreams that you feel is a reality. She came into the room, dressed all in white, just as has been described, and beckoned to me. I got up at once and followed her, and she led me down to the secret staircase. There she stood still. 'You are the young laird,' she said. 'Yes, I believe I am.' 'You have been a good young laird.' And then she disappeared quite suddenly. That was all. 'I suppose the snow drove her in,' someone said. 'But what do you mean?' I asked. 'Who are you talking about?' 'Why, Lady Anne, of course.' 'But who's Lady Anne?' 'Do you not know Lady Anne? I'm surprised at you.' 'Oh, don't tell her, Dick. Leave it till tonight. Then we can all go up to the tower room and tell the whole thing.' So it was settled, and I was left burning with curiosity, and, shall I own it, with a sensation of fear. I have still one experience to relate, and I want to see it in black and white whilst it is still fresh in my mind. It happened this way. Everyone went out this afternoon, with the exception of myself. I'm not used to these northern climes, and the fireside and a good novel were tempting. What put it into my head I do not know, but I suddenly made up my mind that as the coast was clear, I would pay a secret visit to the tower room. I felt slightly perturbed at my daring, but I was determined not to be imposed upon if I could help it. I had pictured to myself a low-roofed attic. Judge my surprise, then, when I found myself in a spacious and very lofty chamber. The walls were hung with large oil paintings, somewhat gruesome subjects, and on the ceiling, one larger than the rest was fastened. Life-sized portraits of 12 notables looked down with supreme contempt at my open-eyed wonder. I sat down in a comfortable chair, more leisurely to study my surroundings, and unconsciously fell into a train of thought, trying to piece my experiences into a consecutive whole, and found myself lost in a profound reverie. I came to myself with a start. Someone was coming up the stair. I rose to my feet, my cheeks hot all over at the thought of being discovered in my surreptitious act. There was no escape. I must face the consequence. So I stood and waited. I counted the 19 steps. My visitor was breathless, for there was a pause when the landing was reached. And then came a distinct, rapid, metallic rapping at the door. A cold chill went through me. I recognised it in a second as the disturber of my first night's peace. Never again shall I forget that sound. I stood spellbound until louder and sharper it was repeated. "Come in," I gasped feebly, my eyes riveted on the door. Then slowly and decidedly I saw the handle turn, and then there was silence. I could bear it no longer. I rushed forward and threw open the door. I was aghast. I stood facing emptiness. The footsteps, the rapping, all were illusion. No sound but the mocking voice of my former self, whispering, "You fool." 12 p.m. I hope no one will ever see this diary. I should not like to be thought of by my family as convinced at last. How often I have fought the question with believers and denied the possibility of footsteps, raps, or any such like demonstrations having to do with spirits, departed or otherwise. It seemed so puerile, so futile, so beneath contempt. I put all down to rampant imagination, or if something more substantial were needed, then rats. Now, I don't know what to think, and it will put me in a most unpleasant position with the others. But the fact remains that the last 3 days have gone far to shake me from my former attitude of utter denial. However, I must go on with my story. It was just 10 o'clock when a general move was made for the tower room. Our host treated the whole thing in the light of a play, and marshalled us to our places with much covert amusement. The fire flickered brightly, lighting up the portraits on the ceiling, and casting dark shadows into the corners of the room as we arranged ourselves within its glow. The strangers were impatient for our story, and someone exclaimed, "Tell us quickly now, who is Lady Anne?" It was the eldest daughter who answered, and she spoke so quietly, with such conviction, that one felt intuitively that for her at least there were no ifs about the matter. You could have heard a pin drop when she proceeded as follows. Lady Anne is our ghost, and her story is a very sad one, for it is said that she has haunted this house for 300 years. She was an earl's daughter, and in those days she lived here with her father. We know absolutely nothing about her life up to the date of her marriage, when she became the wife of one of the earls of X. From that moment her sorrows began, for he was utterly bad and cruel, and some months after her marriage, in the autumn season, she ran away from him and wandered back for shelter to her old home. Broken-hearted and desolate, the weeks went on as she waited for the birth of her child. Then at Christmas, when the snow was on the ground just as it is now, the baby came. A few days went by when Lady Anne, unbeknownst to her attendants, escaped from her room out into the snow with the baby in her arms. For hours, so the story goes, she wandered in the woods, her reason completely gone. And then she died. Yes, and now? She still wanders. She still haunts her old home, more especially in the winter-time, she is heard. And only a few years ago, when we were away from home and the coachman and his family were living in the house, one Sunday night, he having gone to the stables and the women sitting chatting over the fire, was startled by a thundering knocking at the hall door. The dog went wild with excitement and rushed along the intervening passages, followed by the women, and on arriving at the door, did his best to tear it down in his rage. It was like an army of dragoons at the door, the mother afterwards told us. For 20 minutes the rapping continued at intervals, and then ceased as suddenly as it had begun. Soon afterwards the husband returned, but he had seen no one and heard nothing of the disturbance. No thoughts of Lady Anne had ever entered the women's heads. Rather their fears had been roused by stories of drunken miners, burglars, and such like. Their bravery returned when the husband appeared, and with a lantern, accompanied by the dog, they sallied along the stone passages and boldly opened the door. Not a sound was to be heard but the murmur of the stream, whilst up through the leafless branches of the lime trees the stars twinkled frostily. Over all lay a garment of deep, unbroken snow. Not a footstep, nor a track in any direction. Still unconvinced, they searched every corner of the shrubberies with the same result. No human foot had trod the snow that night. There was silence in the room. On the window panes the ivy fluttered uneasily, and a low cry from an owl sounded weird and uncanny. "There are more footsteps than one," she continued. "I've heard others several times. Once in the vaulted kitchen as I sat by the fire, the strong, heavy tread of a man came along the passage and passed in front of me, but I saw nothing, though I heard it for some seconds in the distance echoing on the stone floor." "Then you've lived here all your life, and really, honestly believe this house to be haunted?" I hardly knew my own voice, so still and small it had grown. "How can I doubt it?" she exclaimed, rising to her feet. "Listen. Oh God, shall I ever forget that moment? I heard it. We all heard it. That footstep slowly coming up the stair. And then the rap. Short, sharp, and insistent. "Come in," she cried. "Come in." Did she come in? None of us can tell. Only one thing I know for certain. I think I now believe.